Okay, so this video is going to talk about how to train the anaerobic system. Now, some of the principles and things we talk about today, we could spend an entire semester, degree, lifetime on how to train individuals for sports endeavors. So we're just barely going to scratch the surface, but hopefully this will be enough to get you excited about the topic. And for quiz one, I'll give a plug. This is a really good lecture to pay attention to and to understand, because I will ask you to sort of repeat and do some of these processes that we talk about today during quiz one. So the chemistry of energy production, we know that the breakdown of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins yields this ATP, which is energy currency, and this helps with muscular work, thermoregulation, digestion of food. As an exercise physiologist, I really tend to think of this in terms of exercise and muscular work, but we know that ATP and energy that we need assists in a lot of other biochemical processes as well. So for the anaerobic system, again, we know that there are two power systems available to the body. The first is the ATP-CP system, and this lasts less than 10 seconds. And the second is the glycolytic lactic acid system, and this lasts about, 2 to 3 minutes. And so what we're going to do in this lecture is talk about how to train the anaerobic system. So straight from your book that I used to help develop this class, it says stimulating structural and functional adaptations to improve performance in a specific physical tasks remains a major objective of exercise training. So that seems a little abstract and not quite clear. So I hope that throughout today's lecture, this will become more clear and you'll understand. So really, what does this phrase mean and what compromises a great training plan? So when I talk about training plans, or I have friends that want me to develop a marathon training plan or a 5K training plan or something for them, it's really important to remember that you have to understand what sort of athlete you're dealing with. Are they usually sleep deprived? How are their nutritional needs? Are they being met? What are their stress levels? When are they trying to peak in competition? If you're training for a marathon, you obviously want to peak at that race. In football and basketball and conference championships, you really need to kind of toe this line of being great all season, but really peaking and maintaining that fitness level whenever you get to those really high stakes games. So in talking about the training principle, the first one is the overload principle. So a greater than normal stress or load is placed on the body, and this is required for a training adaptation to take place. So in order for a muscle to increase strength, it must be gradually stressed by working against a load greater than what it's used to. And so the components that we talk about with this are frequency, how often to train, intensity, how intensely are you training, and the duration. So I'll give some examples of this in a second. So visually, the overload principle, it's not that hard of a concept to understand. It's a lot harder to put into practice, especially with different athletes. But if we start down here with a workout, say that I really have this goal of squatting a 1 rep max of 100 pounds. So what I would do is I would start at a weight less than that, 30, 40, 50, 60 pounds. And I would do maybe 10 reps of squats at 40 pounds. And I would do maybe 3 sets. Once my body adapts to that, how will you know? Well, you're not tired the next day. You can walk because you're not sore. You don't have delayed onset muscle soreness. You feel really good and you feel like you can take on more. Your body knows, and you'll know, and there's ways to test this in an exercise setting and even clinically, but just a feeling that, hey, I can actually do some more. So then what you do is you adapt, and then you increase to, say, 60 pounds. And maybe you do 4 sets and you adapt to that again. And then you increase and you get up to 80 pounds. And so the overload principle means that you're stressing the system, you're overloading the system, you're adapting, and then you're overloading again. And you see how this says a scale of weeks. So, I mean, it really depends on the athlete that you're dealing with, the person that you're dealing with, when they want to peak in competition, and what their goals are. So, again, this is just a really small piece of the overload principle. So this really keep this in mind for quiz one, because I'm going to ask you to develop just a very brief training plan for a specific sport. So really come back to this slide to help you answer those questions. So for the ATP CP system, we know that this lasts up to 10 seconds. And so things like this are, snatching a football, weight training, the shot put, the 100-meter dash. I could not run a 100-meter dash in less than 10 seconds, but the elites can. Isn't that right around where they're at? 9 seconds or so. And so how you train this system, you want to do exactly what you're supposed to be doing in competition. So you have short, high intensity intervals lasting no more than 5 to 10 seconds. You're working on reaction time, you're working on speed pickups, and your rest intervals don't have to be that long, because you're not depleting yourself so much that you need days to recover from a 50-meter sprint, right? So rest intervals will be shorter when you're trying to overload and train the ATP PC system. So here in the middle, I have number of reps per exercise are going to be determined by the athlete's fitness level, environmental factors, goals, sleep, nutrition, stress. Genetics really plays in to fitness levels. And as a coach, you really need to know your athletes. You really need to know where they thrive. You really need to kind of find that sweet spot. And sometimes that can take, more than a season, more than a year or so to understand your athlete. And especially if you're working with younger groups, they're obviously going to grow and mature throughout the years. So this really is a tough balance, but it's really fun to figure out and train. So if we are looking at the glycolytic, the lactic acid system, so this is going to be exercise bouts that last up to 3 minutes. So again, we're talking, or less than 3 minutes, so anywhere from 30 seconds to 3 minutes. We're talking about the 800-meter run, the 400-meter run, soccer, gymnastics. And so how to train this system, we're talking about high intensity intervals lasting no more than 20 to 60 seconds. And then you're going to need a little bit more rest time than you do compared to your ATP PC system, because you are doing high intensity intervals for a longer duration. So what I have down here is this type of training can greatly reduce muscle glycogen stores. So it's really important to alternate between hard and easy days. So if you're an 800-meter runner and you're constantly doing 400-meter sprints or bouts, if you will, you don't want to be doing that every single day, right? So there is this idea of hard, easy cycling days where you train hard one day, do a lot of weightlifting, do your box jumps, do all of your drills, and then the next day, maybe you go on a slower 2 or 3 mile run. So you're still getting a workout in and you're still stressing the systems, but it's not so intently that your body can't recover from the last intense bout, so that by tomorrow you'll be ready to do it again if you're alternating on those hard, easy cycles. So the second training principle is the specificity training principle. And this one, again, is it's not a hard concept to grasp. It might be a little bit harder in practice, but in theory, what are you training for? You need to be specific. You need to use specific muscle groups that are going to mimic what your goals are. So this idea of you get what you train for. So a goalkeeper, let's say in soccer, needs to focus on agility and reaction time and jumping and reaction time. So in comparison to a midfielder who would really focus on agility or stamina or speed. So even those on the same team, they play very different positions. Their specific training needs to be different. So if a runner wants to improve their leg strength, you would train differently than a cyclist. Both need muscular endurance, but the training method that they need would be different. So again, I'll give a plug to really revert back to this for quiz one, when I ask you to develop a very brief and simplified training plan for a specific sport. So hopefully from this lecture, we have talked about the overload principle and the specificity principle. Again, when we train the anaerobic system, we're going to have increased levels of anaerobic substrates. We're going to have increased quantity of key enzymes. We're going to have increased capacity to generate and tolerate high levels of blood lactate during these all-out efforts. We're going to come back to these concepts right here in future lectures. So I wanted to just kind of give a little taste about how we train the anaerobic system and then what is happening molecularly, biochemically as we train this system. So I will see you for the next lecture and see you soon.